Boy, was I glad to see you. I believe then and I believe now that you're not a politician. I think your predecessor was. And he and others did immeasurable damage to one of the most important institutions in American government. Because I believe, as you do, that in addition to the DEA, the FBI is probably the premier law enforcement agency in all of human history, and it should be above politics. For the record, who is Michael Sussman?
Well, Michael Sussman is a lawyer who is currently involved in a trial by the Durham Special Counsel team.
His law firm, Perkins Coie, was counsel to Secretary Hillary Clinton's campaign, right?
Senator, I'm mindful, as I think you would expect me to be, that the case is currently in the middle of trial, and well, we have agents, and I have assigned agents to work on the Durham team. I want to be really, really careful about not getting into a discussion about a case that's currently in front of a very independent and strong-willed federal judge and a jury right now. So,
well, Mr. Sussman was counsel to Secretary Clinton's campaign, and we also know that he was the source of the information provided to the FBI that the Trump campaign had a back-channel communication to Russia, which we now know isn't true. Is it true that Michael Sussman, a partner at Perkins Coie, counsel to the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the source of this information about the allegations regarding the Trump campaign, is it true that he had a badge that gave, an FBI headquarters badge that gave him special privileges in entering the FBI building?
Well, Senator, what I would say to you is much in keeping with the gracious comments you made at the beginning about my commitment to trying to make sure I do this job the right way. That includes making sure that with a case that is currently in the middle of trial and an investigation being run by Mr. Durham that we are actively helping him with. I don't think I can really get into a discussion of those topics at the moment.
When the FBI opened a file to investigate Mr. Sussman's allegations, is it true that the FBI concealed Mr. Sussman's identity?
Again, I completely understand your interest in the question, and I respect it, and I just hope you will respect the fact that because I've got agents working with Mr. Durham on the case and they're in the middle of trial right now, I just don't think I can get into a discussion of that here.
When the FBI opened its file to investigate the allegations that Mr. Sussman, on behalf of the Clinton campaign, made, now known to be untrue, about these back-channel communications between the Trump campaign and Russia. When the FBI opened the file, is it true that the file said the source of this information was not Mr. Sussman, but the Department of Justice?
Again, the same response. These are the very kinds of questions that are being litigated in front of the jury and Judge Cooper right now.
Senator Kennedy, I would just urge you to follow a separate line of questioning. As Director Wray has said, he's not going to answer questions relative to this case that's being litigated.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, and you know how much I respect you. I want my time back, by the way.
You can have those 3 seconds that I took.
No, you talked for about 10 seconds.
I'm happy to give you those 10 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your help with my questions, but I can handle it myself. Chris, at some point, you're going to have to address this. And I understand you don't want to address it in the middle of a prosecution. But there are millions of Americans that look at this and think, I'm not saying they're correct, that the FBI has become a political organization. And at some point, you're going to have to address that. The institution is just too important. And some of my colleagues may not want to talk about this, but we're going to have to talk about it at some point.
Well, so first off, I totally appreciate your concern about our institution, and I will tell you that what I can speak to now is that I have implemented all sorts of reforms that I've spoken about quite publicly, over 40-plus corrective measures that deal with a lot of the same issues that are at the heart of the underlying investigation. I completely turned over the entire leadership team in the FBI. We've taken disciplinary action where we could, but we've also been in close cooperation and coordination with Mr. Durham, who is the special counsel, and I think that's the best thing I can do to help address the concerns you're talking about. As to the FBI's reputation, I will tell you, having been to all 56 of our field offices, now almost all of them twice, having been to New Orleans just earlier this month and Baton Rouge just shortly before that, what I find in talking to Americans out in the field, law enforcement partners, business leaders, community leaders, victims, prosecutors, families, is a widespread, even resounding appreciation and respect for the men and women of the FBI. And you will be, I hope, relieved to know that in Louisiana, over the last 3 years, last two and a half years, the number of people in Louisiana applying to be special agents of the FBI has doubled what it was in the first few years when I took over. And so I think that speaks very well of the good citizens of Louisiana and their appreciation and view of the FBI's credibility.
And I thank you for coming, Chris, and I thank you for all the hard work you've done. But I'm going to stand by my comments. I think at the right time you're going to have to address this and assure the American people that,
Senator Hagerty,
that the rot is gone. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thank you, Chairwoman Sheen. And Director Wray, it's good to see you here again. I'd like to turn my comments to something very disturbing that's happening right now with respect to the Supreme Court justices. And what we've seen in recent weeks are protests at the homes of Supreme Court justices and their families, something that I think that should be completely out of bounds. It also may be illegal. Federal law prohibits protesting at the residence of a judge with the intent of influencing the judge. And many of the protesters are doing just that, protesting outside judges' homes, attempting to intimidate them, I think, into changing their ruling on the Dobbs case. So, Director Wray, is the FBI in any way investigating these protesters as a potential crime?
So I don't want to get into any particular predicated assessment or investigation that we may have ongoing right now. I will say that we're working very closely with the U.S. Marshals, who, as you may know, are now providing round-the-clock security at the justices' homes, and with the Supreme Court Marshal and Supreme Court Police. Together, they have responsibility for protection of the judges themselves and their facilities. But I will tell you this, my view and my instructions to the FBI are that there is a right way and a wrong way in our system and under the Constitution to express what you're upset about and who you're upset with. And violence and threats of violence, no matter what you're upset about or who you're upset with, is not the way to go.
I couldn't agree with you more.
We will pursue all lawful predicated investigations we can to ensure that.
The U.S. Supreme Court Police recently reported, I'm going to use their quote, a significant increase in violent threats to your concern against Supreme Court justices and the Supreme Court building. And as FBI director, it sounds, and I just wanted you to confirm that you've received information that the Supreme Court and its members are facing elevated threats that do warrant increased security, intelligence resources.
As I said, we're in close contact with them, receiving tips and leads and things like that from them, and without, again, weighing in on what in the way of assessments and investigations we have open. But my charge to our people is that we are going to aggressively pursue violence and threats of violence against public officials, including against judges.
I appreciate that, Director Wray, and I think I share your concerns, and I think that many on our committee. I am working here on our side to make certain that, along with the extra help that the U.S. Marshals are providing right now, that if there's any shortfall in monetary resources needed, particularly in the very near term, to make certain that the justices and their families are properly protected, that we address that, because heaven forbid these threats turn into or manifest themselves into the violence that I think concerns us both. I'd like to turn to another issue now that's at our southern border, specifically the case of a Colombian national named Isnardo Garcia Amado, who recently crossed our southern border and who was flagged by the FBI Terrorist Screening Center. He was released by Border Patrol agents into the United States on April the 18th. Then on April the 21st, 3 days after his release, the FBI alerted the Department of Homeland Security that this man was on the terrorist watch list. You'd think that DHS would have then immediately arrested this person. Yet, despite knowing that a suspected terrorist had been released in the United States, the leadership of the Department of Homeland Security didn't even authorize ICE to arrest him until 2 weeks later. He was in Florida by that time. So, this Colombian national was caught by DHS and then released into the United States before the FBI determined that he's on the terrorist watch list. Is that your understanding as well?
I will confess, Senator, that I'm not sure I'm familiar with the specific case. It has a vague ring of familiarity from something I got briefed on, but I think I would have to circle back to you, which I'm happy to do.
I'd appreciate that. You can see my concern, though. And I guess my broader question is, in your view, if this were to happen, does that jeopardize American safety to catch and release border crossers before the FBI has had the opportunity to make that determination as to whether or not they're terrorists?
Well, certainly, I think we need to have close lash-up between FBI agents on the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, especially in the border states, with their DHS counterparts who have a very tough job, those folks, those CBP folks down on the line there that I've met with. And they usually have people designated on our task forces, which is designed in part to prevent some of the slippage.
No, that slippage is a great concern. Even further concerning is DHS taking 2 weeks after receiving information from the FBI to actually notify us to arrest a person. I mean, does that concern you as well as slippage that could, again, endanger American safety?
Well, I certainly understand the concern. I think I would need to kind of drill in further on the facts to make sure I've got the full context.
I would appreciate that. And also, when you come back to me, if you could let me know how many border crossers have been apprehended that are on the national terrorist list. I'm deeply concerned about this. When I went to the border myself about 6 weeks ago, I was informed that 157 different nationalities have been apprehended at our southern border in the past year. That's a deep, deep national security concern, and I would very much appreciate your following up with me in terms of what's known, and also if you have any estimates on what's not known, because I would think that's an even greater concern. Are those people that are coming here using the border, as Senator Moran talked about, for some very nefarious purposes? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty.